Alright, so today we're going to be replacing the valve cover gasket and temperature sensor for the ECU on a 1990 Miata. Right now you're seeing the valve cover gasket, and right here, this one here, is the temperature sensor that goes to the rear of the engine. So because we're doing the valve cover gasket, it's always a good idea to go ahead and change this sensor, because you're basically going to have pretty good access to it anyway, as you have to remove the coil pack, which this resides underneath the coil pack. You have to remove the coil pack in order to change the valve cover gasket anyway. Okay, so basically you're going to need a metric tool set. In order to change this sensor out here, you're going to need a 19mm wrench. Okay. And now to get your coil pack off, you're going to need some sort of ratcheting wrench to get the one problematic bolt off, and I'll show you when we get to that.
Is that 19 too?
This is a 14mm. Okay. And you're going to need 10mm ratchet, socket and ratchet to get the valve cover off. Okay, to remove the coil pack, we have a bolt on this side here on the top, another bolt on this side here, and this is the one underneath there. It's really quite hard to see, but there's another bolt in behind underneath these pieces here that hold on the coil pack. So there's 3 bolts all together. The one underneath there is the difficult one, where you're going to need that ratcheting wrench. But for me to get to that now, I'm just going to pop off this engine ground here first so I can get my ratcheting wrench in behind there. I'm going to take that bolt off first, and then I'll take these other 2 bolts off and then break the coil. We're going to sneak in here with our ratcheting wrench and get on that bolt in the back. Oh, that's actually a 12mm. I got the wrong one here, 14. Yep. Okay, let's try that again.
So 14?
No, it's a 12.
12, okay.
Okay, now once you get that on there, just leave it like that. Give yourself a little bit of leverage help.
This is a cool trick.
Double wrench it here, and then come off. There we go, you hear that? That's where it broke free. Alright, so now it's loose, and that's basically can be removed by hand now. Take your hand in there, spin that bolt out. Still a little warm. Do this on a cold engine. Always not a bad idea to do that.
Are you okay, sweetheart? It's not hurting.
No,
it's good.
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky little spot to get in there. Once you get it started, shouldn't be too bad. Now, you probably see on a lot of other videos where guys will, once they remove this bolt, they don't put it back in, simply because the consensus is these 2 bolts are enough to hold the coil pack steady, so you don't need this 3rd bolt. So a lot of guys will just leave it out. Okay, that's what you're after.
Nice, good job.
That holds the bottom of the coil pack on. So now that that's out, we're just going to take these 2 off here, there and there. Undo the wire clips, and there'll be another wire clip underneath that's attached to the coil pack underneath. We'll only be able to get to it really well once we move the coil pack up, and then we can disconnect it. Loosen the coil pack, undo the necessary connectors.
Okay.
And then the coil pack will come off.
So the spark plugs first?
I can take these. These are going to come right off anyway.
Okay.
So they'll come off the coil pack. Maybe I can leave them on. I can leave them on and then just take all of these off.
Okay.
They don't need to come off when I remove it. They can stay on. So this one and this one. Let's make sure I got the right one. Okay, that's 12mm. Okay.
12mm?
Yep. Okay. Bolts on the top of the coil pack. Ooh, that's tight. Okay. Just gonna break those loose for now. Okay, so they're just loose right now. So what I'm going to do in the meantime is just go ahead and disconnect the electrical connectors. Get those disconnected first, and then it's just a matter of just removing the coil outside of its resting place here now. Now, obviously, to get it out, what I'm going to do just for now is I'm just going to leave these plug wires connected to the coil for now, and of course just take out these plug wires off the engine, and then once the electrical wires are disconnected, I'll be able to take the whole coil pack right out.
Do we need to take off the spark plugs or anything? Or they just stay in? Okay.
They're down here. So we just want to pinch this together here. Pull that apart. That one's gone. And then this is the O2 sensor, which we're just going to disconnect anyway for now, as part of our work. Okay, then that's disconnected. Okay, so now, all things being equal, we can take off, you can slide out the coil pack now. There will be a wire connected down to the bottom. There's a little bracket there that's holding a wire in there. I believe it's the O2 sensor wire. We can slide that off once we remove it.
What does O2 sensor mean?
Oxygen sensor.
Oh, sorry, 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, right now we're just going to remove the plugs, wires. So they'll come free with the coil. Put this guy out of there. Okay, and again, once we do this, then that gives us access to get to these 3 bolts for the valve cover gasket, plus all the other ones are now within reach for us. No issues there. And off comes the coil pack next. Okay, right now we're just taking off the 2 bolts, the final 2 bolts for the coil pack. Set them up by hand. There's a clip here that goes on, it holds this wire connector here, so I just slide that off the top. Put your bolt somewhere safe. Now, move your oil dipstick there so the coil pack comes free. Well, you can see where the other connector was. They never connected it there. So whoever put that oxygen sensor on, they just didn't put the wire back through there, and that's okay. That's okay. Looks like the wire's in a safe spot. So we're just gonna take this off. It's free. We're just gonna set it aside now. And then we have another job to do before we actually do the valve cover gasket, which is that sensor. Okay, so this is the sensor here we're after, right there. And it's got this wire connect, like a little wire clamp kind of thing that holds the wire connectors together.
That's
the
a green
plugs,
thing, right?
the plugs together, yeah. So that's your green plug. So what we have to do is just get a little tiny little screwdriver on each side. Pop that wire connector clamp off gently on each side, and then what you can do is the connector will then come off, and then you get your 19mm wrench in there, and then take that sensor out once the connector is free. What we're doing now is we're just going to go ahead and loosen this off. Okay, and it's got that little wire clip that we talked about, which is kind of tricky. So what will help you here is if you have a stubby 19mm wrench versus a conventional size one, just because it's easier to get in there and you can get the proper leverage. So right now I'm just going to slide this in here. I've already used this one to kind of loosen this already before we started filming this piece here, but you get the idea. We got a 19mm wrench. We're going to slide it on and actually loosen the sensor first before we do anything with the clips. And the reason why is because you can turn the sensor around and actually see what you're dealing with as far as the clip goes. Not sure if you can see it from there, but with this, you want to do it, turn a sensor towards you while it's actually still in the engine. Pop that one clip, side of the clip off, and then you can actually spin it right around to another spot where you can see it and pop the other side off, and then disconnect the wire from there. And if you try and do it as is before you loosen it, it's just quite a bit more difficult. Okay, so right now I popped the clip off, and the easiest way that I found was actually face this side towards you, okay, and get a tiny little screwdriver in here and just work these out of its groove, because these will actually come forward and reside in these little grooves here. So just twist them and just gently push them out, okay? Some people could come from the sides, right? You know, that might help too, but what I found is this was much easier. Just coming from here, give it a little twist, and it'll release with a little bit of guidance. Same with this side, and then this comes right off, okay? So you can see this one's had better days. These sensors seem to obviously take a lot of heat. They take a lot of engine heat, and they're in there in a specific area right under the camshaft angle sensor, which if that gasket starts, that O-ring starts to go, it's just going to drip down, and this is right in the general vicinity where it's going to get covered in oil. Okay, so we're just going to put this clip up here. Careful of that ring, that little wire doesn't jump off that connector. So just tuck it up here for now, right there. Okay, so now we're ready to pop that out, but we're going to get the new one ready. Now, can't stress enough that you want to do this on a cold engine, because there's a good chance coolant's going to come out of this when I pull that out of there. Okay, so out comes the old one, in goes the new one. Okay, and then we're going to reverse the procedure there. Pop this one in. This one comes out. Okay, well, that was all right. A non-event. So you can see old versus new. This is an actual OEM Mazda temperature sensor. Now you can get other ones, other brands, but I paid a little bit extra and I went with the OEM right from Mazda. I can give you the part number at the end of the video if you're interested in it. You can get all sorts of aftermarket brands with these that are quite a bit cheaper. As far as sensors go though, I go right from Mazda, OEM, and then at least you have a fighting chance never to second guess yourself saying, yeah, I wish I would have put a more expensive sensor in there. So anyway, I'm going to put the new one in, tighten that back up, pop this back in here, and be careful when you're pulling it out because there is a washer in there. Be very careful about that, because that was easy, because that actually didn't come off with the old sensor. It was just still sitting on there when I took the old one off. So that was lucky. Okay, now we're just going to get our 19 mil wrench and just tighten that up. And again, you don't have to go crazy tight with this. Okay, the beauty part of this is we're using a shorter wrench. Okay, give it a good pull with this. And you can get it tight enough with this. All right, work your way in there, get the right angle, give it a good one, and you're going to get it tight enough. Okay, so now the next step really is just going ahead and connecting this back on. And we're done with that part of this. So when we connect it, it is directional. There is a cutout part here in this wire connector here that will actually line up. Here's the old one for reference. It's going to line up with that. Okay, so when the new one I got in there, it's actually on the far side, passenger side, so it's sitting just like that. Okay, so we're just going to pop this on very carefully. Okay, and now I can see those little wire pieces there that are actually going to hold it on. Now I just have to pop those in place. Just very gently. Probably, there you go, you heard that. And you hear that, okay? You can do that with your fingers. You don't need to get a screwdriver in there because they're just resting on the outside plastic of that connector. So that's on. So we're good. We have replaced that sensor.
Go, sweetheart.
Okay, so the next step now is we're actually going to tackle the valve cover removal. Okay, so obviously we're going to have to take this off here, this clamp, and any one of these clamps, probably one, make it most convenient here, probably take this one off and probably that one off, and then these bolts. Now there's a sequence to the removal, or loosening I should say, first, of these bolts that hold the valve cover gasket, or the valve cover on. Now I already know that my bolts that are holding this one on are too tight. I already know that. I tried loosening one and I just know that they're tight. It's an easy thing to do because it's a psychological thing. You don't want this to leak after you went through all that work to put the new gasket on. So someone back in the day must have just over tightened these. Okay, I already know they're tight. They're not supposed to be tight at all. I can give you the torque spec in the description of this video below. It's quite light, and it's in inch pounds, not foot pounds. So it's very, very distinctive rating, of course. So you want to do these in a specific order as well. So when you're taking them off, you're actually leveling out the pressure that's on the valve cover itself when you take it out in a spiral pattern. So this is a documented way of removing these. It's in the shop manuals and so on. So you're going to want to start here. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that's the way you're going to loosen those off. And of course these two here. But these are the most critical ones because those are the ones that are really holding the valve cover gasket on. So because mine are really tight, I'm just going to bump them loose a little bit at a time. And then I'll come back around again in the same pattern just to get them the rest of the way out, because I don't want to back them right out knowing that these ones back here are probably way too tight. So I just want to be extra careful when I remove them. Okay, so now we're just going to remove these hoses, and very carefully you can just loosen the clamp, walk it back a little bit, and then just let it go tight again. That'll give you a little bit of working room to slide it. Once you see it move, then you don't have to pull so hard because you know it's already broken free. So just save your hands and then just gently work it. Don't reef on it too much because it will come off, and when it does, it'll release pretty good. So just wiggle it. It's going to come off. There we go. And we're going to do the other ones over here.
I'm sorry.
Now we can take this one off here, which is fine. We'll just do the same thing. Back this clamp off here. Wiggle this one down. Okay, great. And then we're going to do the PCV valve. We're just going to back this one off here. Now there's something important to note here with the PCV valve. In these engines here, you have a rubber, it's called a grommet, right? And then that's basically the gasket that your PCV valve sits in. So when you're removing this hose, just be careful that take a look at your gasket or your grommet first before you start riffing on this, because you want to make sure that this isn't actually crumbling away. Okay, you want to make sure that you're cognizant of the fact that either this is okay or it needs to be replaced as well. If it starts to, you can see chunks coming off it, which can happen, there's a possibility that chunk will actually fall inside here when you take this PCV valve out. But right now we're just going to take the hose off. Well, the PCV valve might come with it, but we'll see what happens. But anyway, just be careful of what's going on with here, especially with this grommet here. So we'll try and slide it off. I'll take the PCV valve, it's easier, I'm not going to argue. Okay, so you can just twist that right out of the way. And then you can see this grommet seems to be in decent condition, okay? And I'm not too worried about that just crumbling and then just falling into the engine as I remove it. So as I said earlier, I know that these are too tight. Someone went and just over tightened them. So I'm just going to bump them loose just a little bit in the pattern. Okay, and again that pattern is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. These two are really not necessarily holding on to that much of the valve cover. They're really not that important as these ones are. That's why these ones are sequenced. And you can look this up too. It's on, you probably find it in shop manuals or other sites that have documented the removal process.
So is the size a 12, sweetheart?
This is a 10 mil,
Okay.
10 millimeter. And like I said, I'm just gonna, I know it's too tight, just gonna bump it like that. Like we're talking a 1/16 of a turn. I'm really just erring on the side of caution here. Okay, see there? Okay, just a little bit. Just, okay, yep, just a little bit. Yeah, you can hear how tight those are. So we're just loosening them off just a little. Okay. Just bump it. And that one. And that one. Back to the first one. Okay. There we go.
Nice.
Let's go.
That's smart, huh?
Because what you want to avoid is any unnecessary torque or pressure on the valve cover itself when you're removing it. But you don't want to remove it in the wrong order. And if you do find it that someone's over tightened these, just do what I did. Just give it a little, like, quarter of a turn or less bump to loosen it off first. Because if you go ahead and loosen all this one off here, maybe this one over here, you still have a tremendous amount of pressure on this piece here, and you're putting that pressure right on this valve cover itself.
Makes sense.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take those right off. These are all the same. Careful not to drop it down your spark plug channel there. The spark plugs are still in the engine, but you made your pain to okay. Okay, now at this point I'm just going to go ahead and loosen these ones off.
I'm excited to see what's inside. It's like Christmas, like
Oh,
what's
yeah.
underneath it.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
Thank you.
last two bolts.
Okay.
Holds this on. Let me take that off. Technically, we didn't even really have to take that off, but we got a little too excited with our disassembly. That's okay. So you can see these ones are obviously way shorter,
Okay.
right? These ones are way shorter,
Oh, sorry. Did I?
and we're just going to put those in the mix because we already know where they go.
Okay.
Like I said, we didn't necessarily have to take that off there, but we just did anyway. Now this piece comes right out of the mix. We'll go over somewhere safe. So now the bolts are out, okay? And it might be stuck on there, so don't get too aggressive and start pulling and yanking on things like such as this to break it free. Basically, just give it a good tap, okay? Right here, it's a safe spot here. Tap, give it a good tap there. Tap here. Okay, start wiggling a little bit. You got a good hold here, a good solid hold here. Okay, it's already breaking free, okay? So you can see, let's just pull it up, okay? She's gonna come. And then off it comes, lift it straight up. And then here we are.
Oh, okay.
So it's free.
That's cool, honey.
Okay.
So the thing goes around this part?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now what we have to do here is clean this gasket surface off, right? We're gonna go clean that off, wipe it down, clean it off, and you can see here, well, kind of, I'll point it out here, where the person who did this the last time put in the gasket sealer right here. It's hard to tell because it's already black. We need to put in our new gasket sealer here, 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 and then back over here and back over here. Okay? So I assumed that my gasket was leaking out the back end. Here at the back, you can see that there's all sorts of mess going on back here. A lot of gunk coming out of there. and the engine temperatures get so high that even if you do have a leak, it might not necessarily look like a fresh leak, just because of the temperature, and the gunk that comes up will turn it into kind of like a sludge, and it might not necessarily look like a fresh leak. So not a bad idea to just to clean it off. So now with the valve cover off, and of course the gasket came with it, so now what we're left here is with this surface here that we want to clean off. Okay, and as we talked about before, there's this gasket material here that has to come off. You have to clean that off, and you have to clean it off every point that it's on. It's critical to get that really nice and clean, because you're going to be putting new silicone in there. Okay, and the silicone needs to get into, there's a little just a little groove here where the cam caps come on. You probably see it from this side here. So when the cam cap comes and meets this other piece here, there's a little slot there. Okay, that's where the gasket material has to go in. So on this side here, on these and these, you can get in there and get it in, and then just give it a little bump with your finger to push it in to that gap. Okay, try not to make a mess, just bump it in a little bit. And the critical piece is not putting too much gasket material to start with, because then you're just going to end up with a mess. Okay, back here might be a little bit more trickier to get this side here, but just do the best you can. Get a little bead in there. Once it's clean, get a little bead in there and just bump it just a little bit with your finger. Okay, and what you want to be careful too is don't necessarily drag the silicone back this way, because it's really easy to leave that there. It'll harden, and there's a chance that it'll actually bust off and get in here. You don't want that. You do not want that. So that's why it's really critical just to use the right amount and just bump it in there with your finger, and be extra careful that you're not putting too much in there before you start buttoning everything back up. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this surface off, and then I'm going to take a credit card and clean off the gasket material that's still on the surface, and then I'm going to be very extra careful when I clean that old gasket material off. Be very careful I don't knock it in somewhere, and then we'll go ahead and put the remove the gasket from the cover, and then we're going to repeat this process for the valve cover surface where the gasket goes onto the valve cover. We have to clean that off as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this right now, clean this up. We're just going to put the new gasket on. You want to spend enough time to make sure that you've cleaned the space where the gasket's going to sit on the valve cover itself.
Yeah.
So take some time, don't rush, get all of these areas nice and clean.
You took about 30 minutes, honey?
Yeah, about 30 minutes, right? Cleaning this, and then cleaning the opposite side where this is going to go. So this gasket obviously goes only one way. You can tell it's got the two caps at the front and then one at the back. So just go ahead and just lay it on, and then start lining it up. Put these side ones on here first, because it's going to somewhat lock it in place for you. Then go ahead and then just gently align these in, parts of the gasket in where it's supposed to go. Again, take some time here, don't rush, go easy. Go around this a couple of times to make sure that it's sitting in there the way that it should be, because it's pretty easy to assume that it's in there when you're looking straight down on it. You think that it's all the way on. So just take some time, go around it a few times, make sure that it's sitting in there. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier when you go to put it on the actual engine. And you can feel it. Like, this is a Mazda gasket from Mazda. Of course, you can get different brands that are, you know, again, cheaper. It's a cost thing, right? But as far as gaskets and sensors go, I like to go OEM, or right from Mazda, because there's, in my opinion, they make the best sensors, of course they would have one of the name brand manufacturers make them for them anyway, but you get the idea. They might have maybe set different standards for their tolerances with the gaskets and the sensors. So anyway, we're just going to make sure that this is all the way on, and just go around it a couple of times, right? Make sure it's sitting in there good, and make sure that you got the spark plug holes here where it goes in. Make sure you line that up nice. Get those on. Pretty straightforward stuff here. You want to just get it right on there. Now, of course, when you have your valve cover gasket off, a lot of guys like to take the time and clean them up and paint them up nice. Certainly that's your prerogative. You go for it. I'm not really too concerned about that. And now once you get it on, if you have dirty hands like I do, just go ahead and just clean off where you touched it. Just a little bit, right? Just make sure you didn't get any grit on there. Just clean that off a little bit like this. Okay, that gives you another chance to go over it. Slide it down here, okay? Make sure you've got it sitting in here nicely. Around the corners, it can gap up on you a little bit, right? So you can see here where there's a little bit of a play here, so that's okay, because we know that it's fitting at the corner as good as it can. And then over here again, of course, it's sitting nicely across those two openings there. So right now I'm happy with this, so it's ready to go on the engine. But before we actually put it on there, we're going to put our gasket maker on the cam caps on the engine before we set this in place. Okay, right here is our silicone that we're going to use on the cam caps. And I went with the JB Weld Ultimate Black RTV 100% silicone. It's designated as they're marketed as a gasket maker and sealant. Okay, the important thing here to know is you can do other brands, of course, but basically what you want here is something that actually comes right out and says, yeah, this is a gasket maker and sealant. Okay, and read on the back here these will also have a temperature rating of which this will seal, and that's tested to seal at those temperatures, and it'll also tell you the curing information of this particular gasket material, right? So read the back, follow the instructions. In here it says, put it on, go finger tight. Once you got it in place, put your valve cover back on and go finger tight, leave it set and cure. This starts to cure basically right away as soon as you actually open it up. And with this one, I went and got the one that comes with this applicator, because I just want to get a nice precise bead in those areas, and I'm not really interested in just squirting it out of the tube and getting a great big old mess started there. Okay, so we're going to put our gasket sealer, our gasket maker, on the cam caps. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas to be concerned with, okay? And I bought this, and I told you that I got the one with the applicator piece on it. I think it's going to make my life a whole lot easier. I'm going to run a little bead in there, and then I'm just going to bump it in a little bit with my finger to get it right into where it needs to go. Okay, so that's what I'll do now. I'll just run it in here, get a nice little spot. Okay, we don't want, of course we got to force it through.
There you go.
Okay, a little one like that. On this side, we'll just work the same side. Run a little bead in there. Okay. We're not talking much. We don't want to make a big mess because it's really not the goal. It's the placement versus the amount. Alright? A little in the right spot is obviously better than more in the wrong spot. So that's all we're doing here. Getting it in the right spot.
So I'm going this side.
Okay, and then one more over here. Okay, so now the trick with any kind of silicone, really, if you want to just bump it in with your finger. So basically what I mean by bumping it in is just finessing it a little bit in there so you know it's actually in there. Might be kind of gross to some viewers here, but put a little bit of spit on your finger, or just dump it in, dip your finger in a little bit of water, and then what you're going to do is just touch the silicone a little bit with your finger just to push it into that groove. Okay, we're just going to give it a little bump here. Okay, there we go. And those other ones actually look really good anyway. I like that one. So that looks pretty good to me. When the gasket's on, it will do what it's supposed to do. Yep, I'm pretty confident with that. So we're going to move forward. Just that one spot. I just wanted to get it in a little bit closer. So now we're going to go ahead and put the valve cover gasket on.
Where do you want me, sweetheart? Right here? Here.
Okay, so we got everything in place. We double checked our gasket. One last time to take another look at it. Okay, make sure you see there where it's kind of coming out of this part there. Run your finger in there. Make sure it's going to sit down in there. Okay, work that corner back a little bit, and then that'll go down. Those are the spots definitely you want to watch for, because basically what happens now is when you set it on there, you don't want it to pinch and not sit in there properly, right? Okay, we'll just be extra careful with that.
Okay. Oh, I think that one's popping up, sweetheart. The edge.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Go.
Okay, it's on.
Yay.
Okay, so before you tighten anything up, look around the edges just to make sure you haven't pinched anything, or where there's an obvious spot where the gasket is actually not meeting the surfaces where you want. Here you can tell on this side here, the gasket's lining up really nicely here. Okay, now the trickier parts, of course, is the caps in and around there. You can't necessarily see them, and you can kind of see them, you know, back here, but you just want to make sure that it's, you run your finger, you can actually feel the gasket here. So just, you can feel it in there. So anyway, just take your time, put it on, and now what we're going to do is we're going to just finger tight those bolts, foundations, with respect to the gasket material, the gasket maker, to just finger tight these, let it set, and then I'll come back around in an hour and get them the rest of the way tight. Now I will put this torque specs in the description. This is in inch pounds, which is quite a bit different than foot pounds. Make sure you know what you're doing. If you don't have a torque wrench, do not go tight, just snug. Okay.
And we could put a link for the torque wrench if they need it.
Yeah. And it's a good idea to put these back in just so you know in the order that you're going to be torquing them down.
I have 2 more, honey. Here's there. There you go.
Okay, it's finger tight, and according to the specifications on here, it says go finger tight, let it cure for an hour, and then come back and then torque to your specs. So that's what we're going to do. These are kind of critical that you want to seal those up properly. Those spots where we put the silicone on. I guess it's kind of a spot where the gasket just can't quite get it done. So you want to put this in there and make sure that you're doing that, getting it done like that. So do a good job and don't skimp out. You will see people not using this, and I'm not sure what the long-term effect that would be. More than likely there'd be a leak of some sort, but I don't want to do this again, so well, not for quite some time. So I'm just going to go ahead with the recommended silicone, and we'll call it good.
So take a break for an hour?
Yeah, I'm just going to put part of the rest of the piece. Okay, so we've replaced this valve cover. What we did is we just went finger tight all the way around in the same sequence that you're going to do when you actually go ahead and torque it down. We went ahead and put this piece on here, okay? And one other thing we have to do, of course, is put our PCV valve in. But now I'm actually going to put the coil pack on. So when you drop it in, this little bracket goes on the top. Make sure you got it on the top first. It might be kind of easy or a mistake when you drop it in there that this gets tucked underneath there. That's wrong. Put it on the top and just make sure that it's on the top when you drop it in there. And this is where the third bolt went. I'm not going to put that in. I'm just going to go ahead and just do what most people do when they take the coil packs off. Just put the top 2 bolts in. And the consensus is that that's enough to hold this steady in its place. So we're going to go with that. I'm not going to put the other one in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to drop this in place.
Should I stay here, hun?
So we just fold these up out of the way. You might want to take your lipstick out here real quick. Just tuck it up here for now. And then we're just going to finesse this piece in here. We have a piece on the top there. Drop it in. Okay. And we are lining up our holes. Okay. And just finger tight to start and get it going. You might just want to tilt it up here a little bit at the back or the side to get it in place where you can really get the bolts in finger tight all the way down almost if you want. Alright, so we'll go ahead and button those up. Those are 12, I believe. And again, you don't have to go way tight on these. There. We don't have to go way tight. Okay. Now we can go ahead and put our spark plug wires back in. Okay. So we'll just set those off to the side there, do one at a time. And in order. Okay. Drop those in. Give them a little twist. Make sure they're on there good. Okay. And now what you want to do is just arrange these in a way where they're not all crossed up too much. Something like that ought to do it. Or maybe we'll just slide this one over here. Something like that. And then before you leave this spot here, just give these a good little twist here. Make sure there's not some sort of corrosion building up in there. I mean, you can take these off and look down in there if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that, but you can go ahead if you're curious. Go ahead, have a look. See how they are. See if there's any moisture getting in there, which is possible, depending on your climate. I'm going to drop this back in here. And I've got a engine ground I'm going to put back on over here. So I'll just button that up. Okay. That was a 12. Okay. All right. So now we'll put the PCV valve on.
That's this thing, right?
That's that, yep. And then what we'll do is we're going to just time it because we've got about another half an hour before we come back, and then just tighten these up back again into sequence. I might have to move my wires out of the way, but that's going to be, you know, not a problem. And I'll just run around the bolts again in the sequence and tighten them up, and then we're good to go. Yeah, before we go, and if you actually want to drive your car, you might want to put these back together here, which is your O sensor connector and this other connector for your coil. Okay, and we just pop this in here, provided you actually want to drive your car. Go ahead and clip these together. Okay, everything looks good, connected. I think we're going to be okay. And our PCV valve going to go back in there. Okay, so when you are tightening this up, the ratings are 43 to 78 inch-pounds. Certainly not foot-pounds. We're talking inch-pounds, which is quite a bit less than that by an order of magnitude. So if set your torque wrench, if you have one of those that have that rating. If you don't, maybe you might want to pick one up. If you don't, if that's not in your budget, of course you still can tighten these up. Just go easy on it, okay? You don't want to go too tight at all, really, right? Because we're talking like maybe, I forget what the conversion is, like maybe 6 or 7 pound-feet of force on here, right? So just snug, right? And then of course you're going to do it in your pattern that we talked about before. So just go through that, button that back up in that same order, and then what you want to do is take it for a spin and check for leaks when you come back, and then maybe check again in a couple of days just to see how the gasket's kind of seated in there. It should be fine. So basically that's it.
Yay.